Welcome, IGNOU aspirants. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that's a huge favorite for examiners, Malthus's theory of economic development. We're going to break down everything you need, from his famous ideas on population all the way to his theory of profit, so you have all the key concepts to absolutely ace your answers.
Okay, let's just dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to kick things off with his population principle, the thing everyone knows him for. Then we'll uncover his secret weapon, the idea of effective demand. After that, we'll look at what he said about capital, how economies shift from farming to factories, and we'll wrap it all up with the key takeaways you'll want for your exam revision.
So, we're starting with the idea that made Malthus famous. But you're about to see, this is really just the starting point, the launch pad for his much deeper theory on what really makes an economy grow.
Now this right here is the absolute core of the Malthusian hypothesis. You've got to remember this for your exams. He basically said that population, if you don't control it, just explodes. It grows geometrically. It doubles and doubles and doubles again. But our ability to produce food, that just plods along, growing arithmetically, one step at a time. And that massive gap, well, that's the dilemma.
So what stops this population explosion? Malthus had an answer for that. He talked about two kinds of checks, and that's a key word for your answers. On one hand, you've got the grim stuff, positive checks. These are things that increase the death rate, like famine, disease, or war. On the other hand, you have preventive checks, which are all about lowering the birth rate, with the main example he gave being people choosing to marry later in life.
And this is where it gets really interesting. You'd think, if the population is the big problem, then maybe a bigger population means more workers and more growth, right? Well, Malthus said, surprisingly, no. And this is the pivot point that takes us from his population theory into his really deep economic ideas.
Okay, this section is where Malthus was genuinely way ahead of his time, almost predicting economists like Keynes. He argued against a really popular idea back then, and in doing so, he gave us a concept that is absolutely critical for your exams: effective demand.
So first off, to really get what Malthus was saying, you need to understand the idea he was fighting against. It's called Say's law. This was the common belief that, hey, if you just produce stuff, that automatically creates the money to buy it. You know, supply creates its own demand. Malthus thought this was completely wrong and was actually holding back our understanding of how economies truly grow.
And this quote just nails his point perfectly. It doesn't matter if you have a huge workforce. What matters is whether someone with money actually wants to buy the things those workers can make. It's not just about having labor, it's about having a real, paying demand for that labor. That's the whole idea of effective demand.
Okay, let's walk through this together and see how Malthus figured out his theory on profit. Stick with me, it's pretty straightforward. Step 1. The total stuff a nation produces, its output, is just made up of profits and wages. Simple enough. Step 2. Malthus assumed that workers spend every rupee they earn, so their wages equal their consumption. And step 3. The total output has to equal total spending, which is investment plus what capitalists spend plus what workers spend. So you get that final equation for output.
And now, for the big reveal, we know profit is just what's left over from output after you pay wages. So we take our big equation for output and we subtract wages from it. But since wages are the same as workers' consumption, those two terms just cancel each other out. And what are we left with? This incredibly simple but powerful equation: profit equals investment plus the consumption of capitalists. That's it.
Here's a fantastic little trick to remember this for your exam. Just think of the word RIC. R for profits equals I for investment plus C for capitalists' consumption. If you can remember RIC, you've pretty much mastered his theory of profit.
So now that we know where profits come from, let's look at what Malthus had to say about saving and investing that profit. His view is actually quite clever. It's not as simple as just saying, hey, more savings is always good.
Malthus came up with this idea of an optimum propensity to save. Think of it like a Goldilocks level of saving. Not too much, not too little, but just right. You need people to save enough to fund new factories and machines, right? But if the capitalists save too much, they aren't spending enough, and that kills the very demand that makes those new factories profitable in the first place. It's a tricky balance, and optimum propensity to save is a golden phrase to use in your exam answers.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and look at how Malthus saw the big picture of an economy's evolution. He actually had a whole theory on this structural shift over time, and it's super relevant for developing countries like India.
He saw economic development as this huge structural transformation.
As you can see here, an economy usually starts out with agriculture being the biggest piece of the pie. But over time, as it develops, the industrial sector gets bigger and bigger, and agriculture's share of the economy gets smaller.
Now here's the key. Malthus argued this shift doesn't just happen on its own. The two sectors are totally linked. He argued for what we call balanced growth. You see, you can't have a booming industrial sector if all the farmers are too poor to buy the stuff the factories are making. The farm is the market for the factory, and the factory is the market for the farm. They have to grow together.
And he even came up with a simple formula for this. It looks a bit technical, but all it's really saying is that industrial output is directly tied to the amount of capital, the money and machinery, you invest in the industrial sector. It's simple. You want more industrial output, you need more industrial capital.
All right, let's bring it all home. Let's boil everything we've talked about down into a final revision guide. So pay close attention, because these are the points you absolutely have to know to do well on any question about Malthus.
First up, the jargon. You've got to be able to define these key terms. If you can drop phrases like effective demand, optimum propensity to save, and balanced growth into your answers correctly, the examiner will know you really get this stuff.
Second, you need to have these two formulas locked and loaded in your memory. For the profit formula, just remember our little trick, RIC. And for industrial output, just remember that direct link to capital. Easy.
And finally, here are the big, overarching arguments. Think of these bullet points as the outline for your essay. Start with these core ideas and then fill in the details with all the jargon and formulas we just talked about. This is your blueprint for a fantastic answer.
And that wraps up our breakdown of Malthus's theory of development. We'll leave you with one final thought, something to connect this 200-year-old theory to right now. How important is Malthus's idea of balanced growth between agriculture and industry for India's own economic journey today? That's a great question to think about. Good luck with your exams.